sparking energy storage solutions in developing countries. We have several people joining in right now. We'll get started here in just about a minute or so. Um, Participated in the meeting yesterday, and if you were here yesterday, we welcome you back. And for those who are just joining today, we welcome you for today's events, and I'll talk about a little bit about those here at the beginning of the day. Maybe we go to the next slide. For those of you who are returning today, we look forward to continuing the conversation with you about global energy storage and solutions in developing countries. For those of you who are just joining today, we'll spend a little bit of time here at the beginning orienting you to the agenda and some of the tools we'll be using today. So maybe go to the next slide, please. Um, so yesterday was a great day. We had 3-4 hours or so where we really dove into some of the details around energy storage solutions and really placing it in the context of broader market trends and broader move towards a clean energy transition. We heard from speakers from the climate investment funds, the energy sector management assistance program at the World Bank, and the energy storage partnership. We had an announcement from Germany of donations to the climate investment funds. We had a keynote speech from Dr. Imre Juk with the US Department of Energy that really set the context for a lot of the discussions and both a vision for energy storage as well as some of the key issues that we'll be addressing again today. And then yesterday we also had a panel where we had experts from Bloomberg New Energy Finance, NREL, IRENA, people who are working on the ground in the Republic of Maldives to implement energy storage solutions. And then we had a chance to do both highlights as well as some more focused discussions with those within the multilateral development banks that are leading projects on energy storage in South Africa, Colombia, and the Maldives. So we had a chance both to talk big picture and we had a chance to talk about how this work is playing out on the ground. And those are some of the themes that we'll be continuing to jump into today and hear from experts in the field as well as engage attendees on these issues as well. Maybe we can move to the next slide. All right. So for today, in some ways, yesterday was sort of setting the stage at a high level for energy storage and its role. And today we're going to be looking a little more specifically at implementation and some of the key challenges that are out there that might be barriers to scaling energy storage, but also some of the opportunities that are developing, both on the technology side as well as in the context of specific countries and specific country needs. So there are a lot, we'll be talking a lot today about challenges, opportunities, and really the theme that runs through today is this notion of unlocking the value of storage. And we have Dr. Christina Lampe-Onerud from Condensa Innovations will be giving a keynote speech today that'll also be bringing in the private sector dimension to this work. And then in our panel discussion, we'll really get into this notion of unlocking the value of storage from a variety of different perspectives, from technology innovation to project implementation to those that are working in countries to advance energy access, et cetera. We'll be hearing from experts with deep experience in the field, but we'll also wanting to be hearing from you all today. And we have a couple of places where we're going to be crowdsourcing information from you that will really help develop an agenda and programming for future global energy storage program events to be able to continue to engage you and your colleagues on some of the critical issues that are both accelerating energy storage and maybe in some cases holding it back. So we really look forward to that. I do want to note that there's an active social media presence for the meeting today. There's activity on Twitter. You'll see the handle here on the screen, Keeping the Power On. I would encourage those of you who are active in social media to tweet or retweet about today's event. We are really looking at this event and this series of events as a way to build the network of those who are engaged in energy storage, and social media is an important way to do that. So I encourage everyone to help amplify and reach out to your networks about these events. We can go to the next slide. All right, just a little bit on using Zoom today. We have this set up as a Zoom webinar. We'll be recording the event, and the recording and all of the slides from the panelists will be available at the event website that we'll get that information out to everybody who's participating. So if there is a presentation and you want to go back and find those slides, or find out more about some of the speakers after the event, we'll have that available. If anybody is having any technology challenges, my colleague Tess Wendell is on, and Tess can help resolve any of those technology difficulties. We have her email up on the screen right now. It's twendell@rawstrategic.com. We can chat that out as well. And so Tess is your first stop for troubleshooting on any of the technology. Participants are muted coming in the webinar. I'll talk in a minute about the use of slido.com that we'll be using to get thoughts about questions. We'll also be using it for polling, but it's a key way to communicate today. And then we also have closed captioning set up for this meeting for those who need it. You can turn that on and off on the toolbar in Zoom. All right, next slide, please. As I said, we're using a platform called Slido for engagement today, both some polling, but also this is what we're going to be using for submitting questions and answers, particularly during the panel session today. So what I would encourage people to do right now is, if you have a mobile device, or you can do this on another screen on your browser, to go to slido.com. And when you get there, there will be a place, as indicated on the screen right now, for entering the meeting code for today. So that's 121312. And we've chatted in the Slido address as well, so you can click on that. And what that will do is bring you into this meeting. You'll see a place where there's a tab for questions and answers, and then there's another for polls. And when we launch the polls, you'll see that on your screen. For the Q&A, one of the things that's nice in there is you can both add your questions, but you can also upvote other people's questions. So if you're seeing something in there that resonates with you, you can hit the little thumbs up sign, and that'll move that question up to the top of the list. And it's one of the ways in which we help understand what people are really interested in here. So let's give Slido a try here right at the outset, and we'll be using it a little bit later. And this is a little bit of a test of the technology, and make sure everybody is appropriately connected. So maybe we can go to the next slide. Let's see, but actually before we get to Slido, I do want to just mention at the very end of today, after the official meeting is over, we are going to have a networking session that also uses a technology platform. This is called Gather. We'll talk more about it as we move into that space, but I do really encourage everybody to stick around after the main events today. This is an opportunity virtually to, in some ways, emulate what might be coffee time for those who are in a particular time zone, or cocktail hour for those who are in another time zone, and get to know some of the people who are attending the meeting today. Just kind of an informal session. So please stick around, and it's a fun technology. I think you'll enjoy it, and it's a chance to get to meet people from around the world who are attending. All right, next slide. All right, so those of you who are logged into Slido and have entered the number 121312 that you're seeing on your screen right now, a poll should have popped up for you that's asking what city you're joining from. And so I encourage people to do that. I'm seeing that it's already coming in. We've set this up as a word cloud, so we get some emphasis. And New Delhi, it looks like we have several people in from New Delhi. So let's give that a minute to develop and just get a sense of where people are joining in from around the world. All right. If you haven't yet put in your city, I encourage you to do that. Looks like we have a Mannheim coming in chat as well. Um, and West Hartford, Connecticut coming in by chat too. All righty. Wow. Well, this is fascinating. This is truly a global meeting, and I think we are spanning at least 12 or more time zones for today. Great. Well, if you haven't yet entered your city, let me just give you a few more moments to do that, and then we wanted to move into one other poll and test out a different way of engaging people today that we'll be using a bit later. All righty. Great. Well, thank you. Oh, oh, thank you, everybody. It's so interesting to see where we're all joining in from today. Maybe we can close out this poll and go to the next slide. And wanted to try another approach for polling that we'll be using a little bit later today to identify some of the issues that will be of most interest for some of the future programming for the Global Energy Storage program. And this is a ranking poll. And what you will see is that you have options listed of what type of storage is of most interest to you and a range of types of storage. And what you do is to be able to click on the storage that is of most interest to you, which adds it to a list. And then you're able to move things to the bottom or top of that list in Slido. If you, especially on your phone, if you hold your finger over that option, you're able to slide things up and down. So what I encourage folks to do is identify and put at the top of the list the type of storage that is of most interest to you. And then on down the list, where number one is of most interest, and lower on the list are things of less interest to you. This is both an opportunity to practice ranking in Slido, but also to give us a sense of interest for future programming. One of the things we're thinking about will be some more deeper dive into technologies and getting a sense of what types of technologies and types of storage are of most interest is really helpful. And I see that we've chatted back into Zoom the link and the meeting number for Slido for those who are just joining in. All right, why don't I give people just a few more moments to jump in on the ranking. All right, and for those who have identified other types of storage, feel free to use the Q&A function in Slido to let us know if there are specific things that you have in mind for other types of storage, or if there are any kind of particular questions that you have around some of these technologies. You can use the Q&A function in Slido to let us know about that. All right. Interesting. So looks like batteries are leading the list, but strong interest in hydrogen, certainly an emerging area of interest and activity, and then pumped hydropower and thermal and mechanical as well. Great. Well, thank you everybody for doing that. We'll be coming back to some of the Slido polling later in the meeting today. All right, maybe we can move to the next slide. Great. So what I'd like to do, maybe we could actually close out the slides here, because what I want to do now is introduce our keynote speaker. I'm really excited about this keynote. We have Dr. Christina Lampe Onerud, who will be speaking this morning. She's the founder and CEO of Cadenza Innovation. She's renowned for developing and commercializing lithium-ion batteries for the portable electronics, transportations, utilities, and industrial markets. And she currently serves as founder and CEO of Cadenza Innovation, which is a growth stage company that's developed a novel and patented technology architecture, the supercell, which is enabling a new generation of safer, higher energy density, lower cost batteries. And among other things, will be introducing the role of the private sector in this world, and I think a really an important dimension to the work that we're doing. Dr. Lampe Onerud is the only two-time World Economic Forum technology pioneer in the program's history, and previously chaired World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on Energy technologies. So really a global understanding of work that is going on and leadership in this field. She's a member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences and holds a PhD in inorganic chemistry from Uppsala University in Sweden, and also did work at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Dr. Lampe Onerud, we are so happy to have you here today. I will be quiet and we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, here we go. I am so happy to be here. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for having me at this meeting. We celebrate every day an opportunity to do good and do well. And I hope through these opening remarks for today's conference that I can provide a perspective of what the energy transition might look like and what it actually means in the sector of our lives in the time of us being stewards. So I'm going to start by flipping through a few pictures. This is climate change. This is what it looks like. I was part actually of the COP15 meetings that happened now almost 15 years ago, where we were already talking about the opportunities for change, and yet we saw very little happening. Today, we find ourselves where this awareness is no longer new. And in fact, we see in addition an opportunity to really change the way we think about energy, how we think about opportunities, how we think about electricity. And we note that at the same time with an absolute increase in use. In fact, if you look at different regions, and this is why I was glad to accept the invitation to speak with you all this morning, the difference between developed and developing countries and the difference between different segments. First, there is an increase of use forecasted for all regions. It is actually, no surprise, more needs coming in through the developing sector or the geographies than in the developing world, where there has been awareness for some time, but yet it's increasing. When you look at the different sectors or segments where electricity will be needed, a lot of buzz is happening in the transportation sector, and a lot of money is going in for investments in electric cars and scooters and school buses. But when we look at the use, we have an enormous obligation to tend to what is now in a popular science referred to as energy storage, commercial, residential, and industrial storage, which is really the backbone of the economy in so many levels. A fine chart to just take a note of awareness. The hotter the color, so red means so much solar opportunity and basically needing fewer panels. When you go to the light blue, you have also enormous solar income and yet an opportunity to do storage. As you go to purple and pink, a little bit less. The interesting aspect, of course, is that most of the solar deployments are in the pink and purple today, but the opportunity sits in the developing world where you have solar as an unbelievable resource for energy generation, for electricity generation. And of course, we need storage to make that work since the sun doesn't always shine. This has typically looked like large solar farms with large battery farms. And in many of the areas where we need to deploy more electricity, where there's a higher need, there's also space. That's the lucky truth. But it's also true that in order to get leverage and to reach our CO2 goals by no CO2 or net zero carbon by 2050, which many of us also worry is too late, that we have an absolute need for attention to detail in urban settings. So when we look at just energy storage, this is a hot topic in all geographies. So you see here, China, United States, India, Germany, Latin America, and a lot of other countries that have basically clear and definite initiatives. Wonderful. This is a forecast that was made in 2019. We know today that those forecasts are even more detailed and more aggressive. And that comes back to the need for a transition, a global energy transition. The old paradigm, or the domineering paradigm in the developed countries, are the power plants generate electricity. They then are separate from the people and companies and entities, sometimes state, sometimes private, that own transmission. The transmission, people put it into distributions, and then it's received by the users. Of course, this is simplified, but by and large, this is how it works in most developed countries. What is now happening in developing countries and developed countries is a complete disruption. In fact, for those of you who follow finance, this is like we're entering into the Bitcoin of energy. The energy will need to go where it's needed, and it's not clear who controls all of the assets. In fact, energy storage is at the very, very apex of defining some of these markets. Why? Because as we slide in renewables and yet taking down the emissions from fossil fuel traditional, the storage aspect is the friend of both worlds. It enables the fossil fuel users, the traditional stability of the electricity grid, to be less polluting, more efficient, and ultimately lowering cost. While storage is an absolute necessity for the renewables, wind, solar, geothermal. Where we have opportunities then to look at this as an economic driver is, of course, when we also look at the local economies. My thesis has been for many years through my work at World Economic Forum and other forums to basically have global ideas get implemented locally. And it's interesting today when we find ourselves at pretty high geopolitical tension, and yet with this enormous need to respond to climate change call to action, and also an opportunity to deploy new cool green jobs. Some of these are tied to resources that haven't been tapped, and how we think about resources is also changing very rapidly. I list here a few that are critical for the lithium-ion industry, just specifically that industry. And it's interesting when we look at this, that there are lots of minerals available, so we can deliberately diversify the global supply chain. Today, it's pretty concentrated, with yet a lot of investments going in already for supply diversification and a lot of interests. So what business is looking for all the time to make investments are stability and policy. And here is a mega trend. We are going into a sustainable electricity paradigm. We almost all agree that by 2050, we have to be at net zero. Some think that is 2040. And regardless of which of those, it means action now, and we see it. We also see a different framework, how we think about a circular economy. So the fact that you can open up new mining is great, and we can do that in better ways and with best practice and more sustainable ways. But we're also forced by this energy revolution to learn how to reuse and reduce use in general of materials. And batteries are fantastic because it's like you can recycle and you bring the battery, you bring the mine to the process place. So this is an era where we have to tend to the materials, the raw materials, the electrodes, the electrolytes, and all the mechanical features of a battery. We put them together into cells. Cells combine into batteries. Batteries can combine into modules, and modules become packs or racks in some industries. Those are then deployed into transport, industrial equipment, grid, energy storage, telecom, and forklifts. And with this whole ecosystem, we create a battery manufacturing ecosystem. They basically are now the conveners of the electricity in a box. They are also the procurers of the electronics, meaning how do we talk to the electrons that we ultimately want to pull out of the cell, and how do we put those electrons back into the cell? But the marketplace is pretty complicated. In fact, the battery manufacturers need to talk to the system integrators. Now, this is for energy storage specifically as a main player in the energy storage space, electricity provision. So system integrators integrate the batteries, and they talk to developers, and then the end customer is typically, again, the building use or whoever owns the electricity coming in. So this becomes complicated sales process. And for us living today, standing before what has been basically denoted as an intractable problem, we have to juggle finance, products, manufacturing, and deployment. We have to find a way to make global finance and global capital work together with global deployment and local deployment. And yet, we have a chance to put manufacturing and products to be in the local markets. Why is this important? Because there are many winners. There's not one technology that will take it all. There's not one specification that can describe all of the use scenarios. And we basically have a chance to bring lots of people together around being a little bit more long-sighted and having an opportunity to do something really, really good. In business, we talk about unmet needs equals opportunity if we align on what those are. So one of the aspects that is rarely talked about is, so what? What are the specifications? And I'd like to highlight one that I think is really, really interesting, and that is around how we define safety and reliability. So we know electric cars are on the verge of basically becoming an everyday practice. The technology is young, and we need to address some of these issues. For example, they can't just go into fire whenever they like. We have seen that in the big utilities that have tried as well. So statistically, we have some knowledge of what happens with cell phones, laptops, EVs, and what that statistical risk is. So we need innovators to come in. In fact, I would like to make the call to action that we think about 3 elements: low cost, reliability, safety, and high energy. And all of those have to be met into the use scenario. So you could argue that pumped hydro is ultimately the most environmentally friendly if we consider the ecosystem considerations. Yet you can't put pumped hydro into Paris, for example. So you need to have different specifications for different environments. But these 3 always matter. So I will share in 2 slides my passion right now. We have identified a technology and developed a technology that puts safety inside the box at a low cost. It's modular. You just stack them together like Legos, and you can put them into multiple applications. The previous one is for energy storage of buildings, and this one is for telecom. The telecom market is coming into the utility market to say, hey, we own the towers. We are interested in understanding sustainability and reliability of signal. We would like to understand what this looks like and how that works. We are also seeing a shift of technology, like what works. Again, In some instances, we can afford really large systems. In others, we cannot just scale what was done in small footprints. So again, lithium-ion as one of the hero technologies going forward, lead acid being a legacy technology, and the hydropower being something we really understand, are potentially the most important aspects of sustainable and long-term futures for energy storage. There are lots of innovations coming in addition, and they will also play a role maybe in the next few years. But the urgency is here, so we have to go with what we have. The industry is now coming into saying, okay, it's going to be 80%, says Volkswagen, which is one of the biggest car manufacturers, has to be Lego blocks, easy to use. We have a lot of legislation and a lot of testing and a lot of rules around how you certify that something is safe. My opinion, we have enough rules. We just need to make sure that we understand what those rules are and how we interpret the data. Data is our friends, yet understanding exactly what you need for an application is critical. And that leads to an absolute frenzy as we look at the need for energy storage. And what you see here is the action in Asia and China, non-China and Asia in general. All the activity to date has been around the battery technology, especially lithium-ion in those regions. North America and Europe are announcing, but there's still an incredible demand coming just for lithium-ion. And this showcases the opportunity. So not only do we have a need right now to go from an older paradigm, which was very, very government controlled, to distribution of buying decision, of financing decisions, of setting rates, and of creating local systems. Not only do we have an opportunity to learn from our history and technology, with lead acid being a workhorse in battery technology and lithium ion being what everybody uses every day. Since 1991, we've been using lithium ion in our phones and laptops. It's now in cars. It will come into storage. And yet we have pumped storage, we have thermal storage, we have some mechanical storage, we have some new technologies that are further out. But the call to action is to evaluate and try to deploy. We stand before this huge issue of climate change, and we're obligated to take this opportunity and take the seriousness of climate change. And we have a chance to do something really, really good. If we activate, if we engage, not only can we do something very good, but we can actually create opportunities. We can create a new workforce. We can deliver clean air, clean energy, clean water. We can use the innovation in our marketplace today. We can stimulate new ideas, but most of all, we must activate. This is a massive transition in the global electricity markets, in the global energy markets. And the question that I would like to leave you all with for today is a question of ownership. And the question I would like to have us all carry in our heads is, how can we do this together? How are we going to shape this together? Knowing it is not a one solution fits it all. It is not one policy fits it all. It is not one cost fits it all. It will need to be global engagement on capital and on technology, and local engagement to really make sure what problem we're solving. And with that, I thank you again for the opportunity to be here with you this morning. And I really encourage engagement, partnership, collaboration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Lampe Onerud. I love leaving us with this notion of how will we shape this together, and also your notion that unmet needs equal equal opportunity. And I think that's so much about why we brought this particular group together and why we are hosting this event and where we will be going next with this group. We're going to be moving into a session now of asking all of you who are attending about what are some of these challenges, what are some of the unmet needs, and I think importantly, what are the opportunities that creates, because part of the opportunity that we have of bringing people together in a forum like this is to play a role in as Dr. Lampe Onorud said, shaping this together. So what are the ways that we can work as a community to help shape the development of the energy storage world to help serve some of the needs that are out there and tap into the value that it has. So we want to be able to engage your thinking on this. We're going to do a little bit of crowdsourcing right now and brainstorming from all of you, and then we'll move into a panel. And when we come out of the panel, we will ask you to do some ranking of some of the things that are going to come up in this brainstorming session. So this is step one of the process, tapping your all's understanding and expertise on some of the both challenges and opportunities around energy storage. We'll be using Slido again for this, so everybody who practiced it earlier in this event, this is a chance then to bring that back out and help answer a few questions for us. So maybe if we could go to the next slide, which will kick off our first question. So what I'd ask people to do is, based on your experience, what is a critical barrier to widespread deployment of energy storage in developing countries that you are experiencing that keeps you up at night, possibly, that you think is one of those things that, if overcome, could really help advance this area of the energy system. So this is just a sort of a free text response. We'll see people's responses as they come through, and we'll just take a few minutes to give people a chance to answer and look together at what's on people's minds. All right. Seeing a lot here on cost, different types of technology, market policy frameworks, regulatory systems, knowledge, understanding, capacity. All right, why don't we just take a few more moments if people have thoughts that they want to get in. This is the chance to do that. Interesting. Financial incentives, skills. All right. All right, if anybody has any thoughts that you haven't yet put in, why don't you go ahead and do that right now. And we also we have a second question that we'll tee up here in just a moment. That is the flip side of barriers, which is what are the opportunities that people are seeing. And as Dr. Lampe Onorud highlighted, unmet needs just equal opportunity. And so some of the needs that people are identifying here, the barriers that we're identifying here, really call on creative shared solutions, and we'll want to get a sense from you all here in a minute about what are some of those opportunities that you're seeing. All right. Well, it looks like interesting responses here around costs, technology, policy and market environment, capacity, and and understanding. And those are some of the things that we're going to be getting into today during our panel that follows this session, and certainly some of the things that are going to help inform future programming for the Global Energy Storage program. All right, why don't we move into the next poll here? And as I said, this is sort of the flip side to the challenges. And so based on your experience and involvement in the energy storage market, what's a promising opportunity that you see for unlocking the value of storage for energy systems, whether that be around technology innovation, whether it be around deployment, policy financing, other areas? What are some of the things that you are seeing as important for scaling and tapping into the value of storage? Similarly, we'll just give people a few minutes to enter ideas here and see together what people are contributing. Interesting. So seeing things about new technologies, lowering costs, innovative ways of engaging the supply chain, including materials, policy and regulatory design, some aspects of social and economic development, and really access to the benefits of clean energy and energy storage. Some more on supply chain and local manufacturing. Great, I love this. All right, well, let's see. I want to just give a moment if people are thinking about opportunities and you haven't yet entered those. This is a chance to do that. And as I said, we'll be coming back to you a little bit later with some of these ideas refined into particular topics and engage you all on what's at the top of your list for thinking about this community that's involved today, those who are involved in various stakeholders in energy storage. How do we want to be able to engage each other and engage experts in the field, both to unpack some of these opportunities, but also to be able to look at some of these barriers together and think about what are solutions that are out there, and really try to be as responsive as possible to some of the needs in this community and some of the opportunities you all are seeing. So let's give a few more moments for any ideas that folks still have. And as we head into the next panel, if there are other thoughts on people's minds, feel free to chat those in. Feel free to enter those in the Q&A function in Slido. All righty, great. Well, thank you everybody for these great contributions. Why don't we move into the next slide here? All right. So on the theme of today, now is our chance to really dive into this question of what are some of the keys for unlocking the value of storage. And we have a panel discussion on this where we're really tapping into the expertise and experience of people who are involved in energy storage day to day from a number of different perspectives, and can provide insights into this idea of unlocking the value of storage for multiple purposes and from multiple perspectives. We have our moderator today is one of the key people at Climate Investment Funds working on global energy storage program, Chibulu Luo, who's an operations officer for Climate Investment Funds and a key partner of ours of putting the event on today. So Lulu, I will turn it over to you to introduce the panel and hear from our panelists.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, wherever you might be joining us. As Tom has said, my name is Chibulu Libo, and I am an operations officer with the Climate Investment Funds, and I will be moderating today's very exciting panel. But before I introduce our distinguished panelists, allow me to talk a little bit about why we're here today. We plan to discuss the realities of developing and deploying energy storage solutions in developing countries, something that we're very familiar with here at the Climate Investment Funds as we work in partnership with our multilateral development banks who are implementing various CIF investments on the ground, and some of whom you perhaps heard from yesterday during our MDB showcase. Also, listening to Dr. Lampe Onoru's compelling keynote presentation just now, it is clear that energy storage technologies have the potential to transform the energy sector and accelerate the path to a fully decarbonized and zero carbon energy system by 2050. This is especially important given the higher demands for electricity and the energy access needs that are critical for developing countries. And so in this panel, we really want to delve into the specifics. And to start, we want to showcase how energy storage investments are really opening up electricity markets in developing countries. We also want to highlight the range of projects and technologies under development and the need to consider the broader infrastructure, financing, and policy landscapes in these places, which could either be a barrier or an opportunity to scaling up investments in storage. And finally, while there are several tried and tested technologies with different applications, they may not all be relevant to every developing country context. And so today you will specifically hear from experts who are working along different phases of the energy storage value chain, from more upstream activities in the development of the actual technologies, all the way downstream to their implementation and financing on the ground. And so with that, let me introduce our panel. I just have my notes here. So I would first like to introduce Chandra Govindarajalu, who is the Global Battery Storage Program Lead at the World Bank. Chandra will talk to us about the World Bank's energy storage partnership and the actions that they're taking to really increase capacity and investments in battery storage in developing countries. I would also like to welcome Heike Fissner, who is the head of marketing and sales for the energy storage team at BASF. And BASF is a chemical producer and is really in the business of developing new battery chemistries. And so Heike will talk to us about the benefits and application of a sodium sulfur battery that is being marketed and sold at BASF. We also have Alessandro Sessa, who is the head of energy storage business and development for the Asia Pacific, Africa, and Middle Eastern regions at Enel Green Power. And from Alessandro, you will hear the private sector and developer perspective and the various renewable energy projects that are being implemented by Enel globally. And last, but certainly not least, we have Piyush Mathur, who is the founder and director on the board of India's Clean Energy Access Network. And from Piyush, you will really hear sort of the community perspective and how energy storage is really enabling energy access in India, especially as it relates to distributed and off-grid systems. And so to kick off the session, I will now turn it over to Chandra to really give us that World Bank perspective on the energy storage partnership. Chandra, over to you.
Thank you, Luluchi. So greetings to all colleagues from across the world. It's a pleasure to be connecting again at this very interesting forum. So if I may request, should I, the presentation is coming up or should I put it up? There it is. Thank you very much. So yes, Dr. Lampe Onoru's comments were very, set the context for our challenge very nicely. And there are a number of moving parts that need to be tackled, and also the chat window, the Slido, window also showed so many issues that need to be addressed. And in the case of developing countries, it becomes a little more complex, as one would appreciate, and further, given the rapid changes in technology, it increases further the challenges that we need to tackle to make this market viable in emerging markets. Next slide, please. So if with that in mind, the World Bank's program has these two pillars. The first one is on the investment side, which is the support for projects across the world using concessional finance from the climate investment funds, blended with our own IBRD financing and bringing in private sector financing in and other donor financing in as many cases as possible. That is in conjunction with the energy storage partnership, which I'm going to talk about today, which provides the distilled information from global best practices on procurement, enabling infra policy, and how to develop sustainable solutions to the investment program. And also, it goes the other way. The challenges from the investment program are transferred over to the ESP to set the context for its own deliberations and setting the work program. We have so far done about 2.7 gigawatt hours of commitments for funding in several countries, including some middle-income countries like South Africa, India, also least developed countries in Africa, like Central African Republic and other countries. So and some of the Pacific islands, as well as other islands. And we have a good pipeline of projects as well. I would say about 2 gigawatt hours and further 2 gigawatt hours. So we are about 7 gigawatt hours overall, roughly. Next slide, please. So the Energy Storage Partnership has 36 partners from all over the world, including labs from the US, like the National Renewable Energy Lab in the US, agencies from emerging markets, such as the Moroccan Solar Energy Agency, MAZEN, CSIR, South Africa, India's Solar Energy Corporation of India, and also other labs and associations. Energy Storage Association of the US, and Indian Energy Storage Association is a stakeholder, Global Energy Storage Association. So we have a number of different stakeholders that are coming together to contribute their time and try to influence the way technology and battery deployment can be made more effective for the developing countries. The whole idea is that right now the research and development and indeed the capital is being focused on the needs for developing better batteries for the electric vehicle market globally, that is predominantly in North America and Europe, and to divert that energy somewhat to the needs of stationary storage in developing countries. That's the whole idea behind this. We have organized as 7 working groups. There is a working group on power systems, which includes partners like SIGRI and NRC Canada. We have one on test beds and testing protocols that includes MAZEN, NREL, and so on. The power systems group last year produced a report on safe and sustainable operation of battery storage projects. On test beds, there was a report on testing protocols led by NREL. And then we have also a specific focus on training and capacity building, which I have a slide on that. And then we have another group on flexible sector coupling, that given the nature of how this landscape is evolving, with close interaction between different sectors that are needed to utilize the batteries better and bring more value. On decentralized energy storage, given the massive challenge we face of electrifying, bringing electricity to 800 million people that don't have electricity right now. So better solutions are needed, including battery solutions that constitute up to 40% of a mini grid's cost, enabling policies, procurement, and frameworks that is critical to development of the market. And of course, last but not the least, reuse and recycling, that also our keynote speaker alluded to. We are working with several partners, including the Global Battery Alliance, and the Faraday Institution and the Korea Battery Industry Association. Next slide, please. So the way this works is that ESP meetings are held twice a year. We have, these are prefixed by presentations by our client country project proponents, and then that sets the course for the deliberations during the day, during the ESP meetings. Last year, we produced a report on warranties that is critical for development of this market. Warranties address, as you will appreciate, both manufacturing aspects as well as performance aspects, and this becomes even more complex in the case of developing countries, given the higher ambient temperatures, internet access, availability of data, low skills, really severe grid conditions with very long hours of outage. So all those makes the warranty offer also a little bit more complex, if you will. So we have tried to capture experiences that are already available from around the world and put together in a report on this aspect. Next slide, please. Then we worked on a report on policy and regulatory aspects closely with IEA and other partners. Given batteries can be classified as a different type of asset depending on which context you want to use that in, as a generator, providing flexible load, additional grid infrastructure, and so on. And given the status of electricity market development in developing countries, which are mostly non-market, in the sense that there are still vertically integrated utilities, or in some of the we also have a single buyer model. So what could be the models of getting putting batteries so that they can be so that the investors investing in those systems can be paid back. For example, combining it with the generation, like solar generation plus battery, defining it as one system. That is one approach that is being considered or being followed rather. And the other approach is also allowing the grid operator to collect the payments through the tariffs. So that is another approach. And there are other approaches. That is a key area. Otherwise, this market is not going to develop without having clear, payment schemes. Next slide, please. Another report that I would like to highlight is on reuse and recycling. In the view of the nature of materials that are being used, this is an important aspect. And of course, there are companies trying this already. So we have tried to collate those companies. And there are specific challenges with respect to developing countries. Collection is an issue, and refurbishment, once you collect it, refurbishment and reuse, whether the standards can be recertified for use in power systems, that's another issue. And there are other issues. So we try to capture those different aspects in this overview report. And in the coming year, we are going further into this, working very closely with the Global Battery Alliance. Next slide, please. So one aspect that I would like to highlight during year 2 that we are focusing on is on capacity building, especially capacity building of women. We have started a mentoring program to bring more young women into the battery industry. So we have a global mentoring program that is in partnership with the GWNet, Global Women Network for Energy Transition. So there were over 250 applications, I'm pleased to say, during the first round, and 25 mid-career women were selected for mentoring. and that program has been so successful. There's already interest in doing a second round and a third round. So that's going to be one of the areas of focus. And we have a strong focus on training. What we did was we put together an energy storage academy that disseminates the findings of the first year's work to client countries and partners over a period of the whole year, with at least one event happening a month, in some cases more than one event. So that has been a resounding success for our client countries to get better aware of what's out there and what's happening. And we talked about innovation, and this whole idea is that the changing landscape, with new technologies and long duration storage coming up. In that regard, engaging with clients directly on large scale new technology is challenging because there is just not enough track record. There is not enough performance information. Although they might hold a lot of promise, we need to establish some track record. So in that context, the whole idea of test beds is very appealing. So we are creating a global network of test beds, working with clients in South Africa, India, and Morocco. So where they will have test beds that will test new technologies that are more suited for developing country applications. And then you can overcome the initial barrier at a lower cost, because these will be test beds that will be smaller, less expensive, and risk can be managed in a controlled environment, so on. So that will help overcome the initial market barrier for introducing new technologies that may then be scaled up through our clients or larger private sector projects. So that's an interesting idea where SMAP and upstream support can complement how, what SIF is doing in scaling up. So try to bridge the gap between between large scale funding and the test bed level work that will lead to the scale up. Next slide, please. That is my last slide. Oh, there's one more. So we've also in the process, appreciated the complexities of sizing batteries for systems. So to that end, our team has produced a solar PV plus storage app that is provides a preliminary assessment of energy storage requirements, and it is available for everybody to play around with, understand how this works, and then eventually do more sophisticated feasibility assessments on a more sound foundation of how battery can bring value to the system. Finally, last slide, we have all the information that has been produced by the Energy Storage Partnership available on the web at smap.org publications. And we are also active on LinkedIn with the Energy Storage Partnership. We welcome you to follow. We welcome you to be a partner in this process to make this market a much bigger one than it is right now. Thank you very much to the chair for this opportunity. Thank you, Lulu.
Thank you, Chandra. That was a very interesting presentation. Thank you for that. And also for sharing those resources, especially the materials that you have on recycling, because I think one big question is, looking at the various life cycle impacts of, battery use and making sure that we have effective recycling and reuse of batteries. And so this certainly opens up a big question as to whether we can look up into serious, alternative technologies and new battery chemistries. And so this is why I'm really happy to introduce our next speaker, who is Heike Fissner, who will talk to us about BASF's sodium sulfur battery technology and its relevance to supporting a range of energy system applications. Heike, turning it to you.
Thank you very much for the invitation again, and the opportunity of being here. I thought I could share my screen, but okay, let's give it a try. Can you see the presentation?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So. Here we go. Here we should go. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, I would like to give you a brief introduction into what BASF is doing around energy storage, and explicitly about our activities in sodium sulfur batteries, so-called NAS batteries. So please let me just spend some words on who BASF is. We are a global chemical company, and our chemistries are used in almost all industries. What we really feel responsible for is to combine economic success with social factors and also environmental protection. We run globally 6 integrated sites and another 240 roughly production sites over the globe. Last year's number of employees is around 110,000. And with all the chemicals that we produce, we serve around 90,000 customers, also globally, which leaves us with around 60 billion of sales and last year's EBIT before special items of around 3.6 billion. So now somebody can wonder, okay, you told me it's a chemical company, why are you going for battery containers? So this is by far away from your business model, and all these questions are correct. But as you saw on the last slides, we have a strong commitment towards environmental protection. We have very strong goals for our company to reach zero CO2 emissions and so on. And therefore, battery technologies do really fit into this strategic corridor. And moreover, I mean, we saw it on our keynote speaker slides, the market is huge, the market is developing, and especially in the area of long duration. So what we did is we partnered with NGK Insulators, who is the Japanese producer of sodium sulfur technology and sodium sulfur batteries. And our partnership is now based at the moment on 2 pillars. One is we have a sales partnership as well as a joint development agreement together with NGK to develop the next generation of NAS batteries. So when you look where these batteries can be used, you see it all across the energy markets and all across the energy value chain, so to say. So giving a benefit directly at the spot of power generation, grid solutions means grid deferral to a certain extent, industrial consumers, and last but not least, microgrids. I think a very interesting part when we talk about developing countries. So when we look a little bit more into detail of these NAS batteries, then you will see that they do depict features which are very interesting and which do also fit into the discussions which I followed up in the chat, yeah, that I just saw popping up. Can batteries be the only solution to an energy transition? I think all of us will agree no. Is another battery technology needed in order to fulfill some of the things we not yet reached? We think maybe yes. So when you look into what NAS is offering, for example, you see that this is a very safe, a very reliable technology, which has been proven in the field around 20 years. And they depict a very long lifetime. So design lifetime is 20 years. This is a technology which is very climate resilient. So you find these ones in the desert of Dubai, as well as you will find them in the northern part of Canada. So this is not an issue for this technology. Good thing is you only need to maintain at a low level in order to keep them up running and up to speed. Since there are no rare elements, there are no rare materials in these batteries, they are very environmentally benign. Fast response time is a must, yeah. It goes without saying that a battery has to fulfill such a job. And when you look into the center picture, there you see that these are 20 feet containers, 4 stacked over there, but you have them as a one piece as well. And we have a very high energy content into this very compact shape. And I mean, the battery itself is a battery which is explicitly tailored to fit long duration storage, which makes it very cost competitive when people and customers want to meet this sweet spot, which directly goes hand in hand with solar integration, microgrid application, and things like that. As a brief summary, here is a map with an overview of where, how many megawatts of NAS batteries have been deployed up to now. So as a summary, again, I can only repeat myself. So you find these batteries since 20 years in the field already. More than 200 projects in total have been deployed globally. And when we talk about values, we talk about roughly 700 megawatt installed power, matching around 5 gigawatt hours installed energy. So overall, this technology is a proven technology, is a dedicated technology for renewables integration for microgrids. And I think fits perfectly into this panel discussion to give a little spark for further questions. I'll leave you with the last slide. These are my contact details, which you will also find with the PDF, most probably, which will be distributed after this panel discussion. And yeah, I'm looking forward to all the contacts and all the discussions which may come after this panel discussion. And thanks again for having the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Heike. You know, this is a really great presentation, and it's really clear that your battery could be a serious contender for developers that are considering to move away from lithium ion. And I like the point that you made about, you know, long duration storage, because this is something that we're certainly trying to push through our global energy storage program. And so I think this would also be a really good segue into Alessandro's presentation, who will provide a developer perspective and, you know, provide the perspective of Enel, since they have a lot of operations in different countries. And so with that, Alessandro, I'll turn it to you.
Greetings, everybody, and thank you for this opportunity for sharing a group experience in the battery storage sector. I think we can put on my presentation. Yeah, thank you. So in my presentation, I will present, a group experience for deployment of battery storage across its markets of presence. The key drivers that we see for the deployment of storage in growing economies, and the path that we expect should be followed to enable overcoming the barriers that are as of today are slowing down the storage deployment. Moving to the next slide, we can see a very quick overview about Enel Group. Enel Group is an integrated utility active in 32 countries across the world. The main business we are involved are power generation, where we have an installed capacity of around 90 gigawatt across all different technologies. Out of these, 49 gigawatt are from renewable energy, which makes us the largest private player in renewables. Our second main business is our power networks, where we are serving 74 million end users globally, and we are also active in the retail and customer services sector, where we are serving 70 million customers. As a group, we have a commitment to carbon neutrality by 2050, and we are implementing an extensive plan for being one of the leading players for the energy transition to clean energies. Moving to next slide, please. Basically, we believe that battery storage and energy storage in general are one of the key drivers for decarbonizing the power sector. And alongside our growth in renewables, where as a group we are taking a commitment to deliver around 95 gigawatt of new wind and solar generation across our countries of presence, we see that battery storage will be, I mean, will accompany, I mean, this new renewable deployment. We are planning that by 2030, around 30% of our renewable projects will include a storage component, and we expect to deliver a world capacity of around 20 gigawatt hour of storage. As of today, we are already operating and or have under construction around 700 megawatt of batteries worldwide. The main drivers for installing storage alongside the renewable are, first of all, that the batteries allow to mitigate some of the risk that we face with renewable technology. In particular, the fact that with the increasing share of wind and solar in the mix, the renewable energies that are non-dispatchable by nature might face some curtailment. And therefore, I mean, having some storage to add some flexibility to their generation will provide a risk for a risk reduction tool. And secondly, we see that storage is also a business enabler, because it can also allow to provide a broader range of services and generating additional value to comply with regulation or with project requirements in the countries where we deliver our projects. Moving to the next slide. Thank you. Yeah, here we see, we reported some of the trends that are assessed by international data provider. For example, these are charts developed by Bloomberg New Energy Finance. We see that as of today, we have around 10 gigawatt of storage deployed globally, and that most of it is has been delivered in the most developed economies. This happens because in those countries there are already mature regulatory frameworks, and that include market mechanisms that allow remuneration for the value-added services that storage can provide. And in particular, this has been historically driven by the opportunity to provide ancillary services, which have been a tool, I mean, until today are one of the main drivers, I mean, until today for remunerating storage project. But if we see, I mean, at the longer term outlooks of the typical application that we expect for battery storage, we see that the main role in the coming years, where the actual storage deployment is going to boom, will be linked to shifting energy from renewable generators to support transmission distribution network, and also to play a role on managing and optimizing the commercial and residential demand. So we will move from ancillary services driven growth to a deployment that is more focused on longer duration storage and more massive shifting of energy. This is because wind and solar are already almost in every country, I mean, the most competitive technology, and the future cost decrease in solar and wind, combined to the cost decrease that we are seeing in the storage market, will allow to make this the combination of storage and renewable competitive against any traditional thermal generators, so that this will allow to facilitate the transition by compensating the intermittency of renewable production, to make them stable, to shift the excess generation to the times where it is most required, and at the same time to ensure the stability of the network by providing ancillary services with higher accuracy and response time compared to what is happening today with thermal generators. And this is a very great opportunity for developing economies because it will allow to meet their future demand at the most competitive cost directly, I mean, with renewable-based generation. And consequently also reduce their potential reliance on imported fuels and their cost variation. If we move to the next slide. Yeah, in this slide, we see, I mean, what is the typical path that we see in countries for deploying and removing the barriers that energy storage might face. First of all, I mean, most of the countries start from a stalling condition where there are no opportunities to deliver projects, and we can only see some pilots for niche demonstration to demonstrate, and in small scale to test the technology. The first step to move forward is delivering a regulation that enables the participation of storage. So in particular, and this happens, I mean, in particular for the generating a grid code that allows the inclusion of storage in the mix, and a clear licensing and grid connection procedure that in most of the cases is absent for these innovative technologies. The second step is the one of creating I mean, identifying the services and the kind of application that are required from storage, for example, the ancillary services or the opportunity to provide energy shifting, or so to charge or discharge from the network, and create some remuneration mechanism for this type of services that will allow, I mean, investors to participate. And this can happen either via initially, I mean, with the introduction of dedicated tenders that might be designed to test and procure, I mean, these services, which will, thanks to long-term contracts, can attract investors. And as a second stage, when the market would be more deregulated, to create dedicated markets where all the technologies can compete. And this will, I mean, open a free competition across all the different technologies, and will most likely, I mean, enable a full penetration of storage and renewables. Thanks, everybody. That's all from my presentation.
Thank you, Alessandro. It's really great to see the work that Enel is doing, and the fact that you're working in over 32 countries. And so would really love to get into the specifics of your experience in the Q&A. And really, when we think about storage, we normally think about storage for grid-based applications, and we don't really have a conversation, or the conversation is quite limited when we think of storage for off-grid and distributed systems. And so I think it's interesting to bring in Piyush's perspective to really talk about India's experience and how storage is really being used to support energy access in rural communities in India in terms of off-grid applications. And so with that, I will turn it to Piyush to provide his perspective.
Thank you, Lulu. Thank you very much. And pleased to be speaking with all of you today. Appreciate the opportunity. You've set it up well, Lulu, but what I'd like to do today is take you all on a whirlwind tour of India at the grassroots to see how simple battery technologies, simple storage technologies are touching and transforming the lives of people. But before I do that, let me just quickly give you a background on where I come from, what's my angle on the sector and perspective. So I represent an organization called CLEAN, which is an industry network of 200 enterprises working at the grassroots for the development of an application of clean tech and specifically DRE technologies. Clean was established 3 years ago with memberships from industry practitioners like myself. At that time, I was running a pay-as-you-go solar home systems business, but my industry colleagues also, who all felt that we need intervention at a sector level on policy, finance, technology, skills, knowledge sharing, and market creation to actually move the sector forward. And with that idea, Clean was established. Clean has since formed partnerships with a number of international organizations, as you can see on the page, including the World Bank Group, and is doing work across all these different verticals of policy, finance, technology, and skills and knowledge sharing. But I think most importantly, where Clean has a unique perspective, simply because of its proximity to ultimate sort of users at the grassroots, is in access to markets. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So as I said, please come with me on a quick tour of India, and I'll share some examples of how storage is touching and transforming lives on the ground. So here's a very sort of contextual example, given where we are in the pandemic. You see the picture of a lady here on the slide. She's obviously a seamstress, as the picture suggests. She's based in Manipur, and because of poor energy access in the state of Manipur, she was provided through her self-help group a solar powered sewing machine about a couple of years ago, and that already has improved her livelihood. However, over the last year or so, as we all sort of sunk into an unfortunate pandemic, there was an immediate surge in demand for face masks, and her services were called in. Not just her, I mean, there's a whole community of women who are working on this, but she was called in to create more masks for the community. Unfortunately, solar without storage did not give her enough hours to do that. So a very simple solution was devised. All these women were provided 75 ampere, very small seed lead acid batteries, which then could provide them nighttime use of their sewing machines. That added 3-4 hours of working time to their daily routines. And they could actually not only increase their production of face masks, but the storage paid for itself. This is not a technological innovation. This is simply applying proven technologies to situations which most compellingly utilize them. Let me present another similar example, again contextual, given what's going on in the world. This primary healthcare center in Meghalaya, which again is a remote state in northeast of India, also had irregular electricity, cannot provide primary health care for what it's sort of was originally set up, cannot even store vaccines and basic injections, and cannot sort of keep patients after dark. So a simple sort of storage solution is now actually helping not only provide basic lighting, but also power basic medical appliances, which can actually make it work like a primary healthcare center. Most importantly, it prevents all the people in the community to travel long distances and sort of consume and burn fuel, but also time and money in accessing the same health services. Another example, I think we're all familiar with mini grids. Now, mini grids can mean anything, right? So they could be very small, 25 kilowatts, even smaller in some cases, but they could also be. Here is an example of how a small 25 kilowatt peak mini grid installed in a village in Jharkhand has actually catalyzed a lot of socio-economic development in an otherwise marginalized tribal community. They are mostly agrarian, so reliant on crops, but the crop yields were abysmally poor, and they were trapped in a spiral of energy poverty and sort of financial poverty. Simply installation of this grid with this mini grid with storage. The significance of storage is that it actually optimizes their use of the capacity around the clock, and they could use it now for agricultural uses like irrigation, oil expelling, um, uh, rice processing, and also non-agricultural users. So shops in the local area, domestic lighting, metal fabrication works. But storage has really transformed the lives of people in this village. We've been measuring the village GDP year after year, and impressively, that's been growing up 14% year on year. So you see how small intervention can actually bring about a very significant change in the livelihoods and prospects of people. Here is an example of a simple mobile power trailer. We all understand and appreciate the problem with diesel generators. They are still very popular, but have all the complexities of running fuel supply chains in remote parts, plus also running costs of a generator as well as fuel costs. So here's one of the members of Clean has devised a simple power trailer, which is built with some sort of combination of oxide fuel cell hybrid battery technology, um, but can actually very efficiently replace any conventional generator. It's very versatile. You can take it anywhere, and it's flexible use. So you can actually get an AC output as well as a DC output. But again, simple proven technologies pressed into service to actually flexibly meet the need of people who otherwise would be reliant on unclean fuels. Yet another example. This is the business that I used to run, Simpa Networks. You're all probably familiar with solar home systems and pay-as-you-go solar home systems. They by themselves serve a very big need in off-grid communities. However, the situation in India is quite peculiar. Almost all the homes are grid connected and have some varying degrees of access to energy through the grid. So to provide them a completely grid independent solar home system obviously was less appealing because they had already invested in different types of AC appliances, a fan, a TV, and a few other sort of light fittings. So for them to now duplicate all that AC infrastructure with sort of a DC infrastructure was sort of not very attractive. So at Simpa, what we did was created a AC/DC interoperable solar home system by combining a microinverter and a small battery, such that solar home system accepts DC as well as AC current and throws out AC as well as DC output, so as to provide seamless AC/DC functionality to customers. They don't care about whether it's AC current or DC current, they just care about functionalities. And as long as we were able to provide that to them, we were actually serving their need. But not just that, by employing a priority controller, we were actually using energy first from the solar panels and then from the grid. And in combination with storage, it actually achieved cost savings for them because they were, to that extent, using less energy from the grid. So here are some simple examples of how very basic applications of existing technologies have been innovatively applied to meet needs of customers on the field. This session is about the lessons on the field. So I just want to underline and end my sort of comments today by pulling out for you what, in my mind, are these lessons. So yeah, I think the first lesson is that for us, storage might mean frequency management, capacity management, but for these people, storage means livelihood, storage means health, storage means education. So it just puts into context the significance of the work that all of us do in the space of storage. And we must therefore act with that responsibility and urgency and imperative. Also, there is an insatiable appetite for storage on the ground. So absolutely any dollar of investment that goes into storage is well invested, because For many of them, storage is their energy ladder. Panels and solar panels and other technologies are sort of decentralized technologies are more recent sort of phenomenon, but for years and years, they've all used batteries to give them greater energy security. So yes, there is absolutely limitless insatiable appetite for storage. The third lesson is that it's not always about the newest and the brightest technology, but proven, established, often legacy technologies at low cost are actually as relevant for serving the need of people on the ground as modern technologies might be for grid applications. So I think there is an opportunity of using legacy technologies, sometimes technologies which otherwise are sort of getting less and less popular in this context at sort of efficient prices to solve the need. And lastly, in parallel to emphasis on technology development, solving the financing challenges for the utility scale, I think there is a almost equivalent need to solve that challenge at a decentralized level for market creation, market development, as Alessandro was also just mentioning, for aggregating demand, for providing financing to these customers. So, and I'm sort of happy to note that CIF actually has already played a role, and it was indirectly through Asian Development Bank. It was actually a financier of Simpa Networks, which is the business that you see here. So, so those are some of the sort of lessons that I like to sort of share with you and leave with you. Happy to tell you more and answer your questions as we go into the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Piyush. This was great, and thank you for taking us on that trip to India. And your comments on finance is a really great segue into our moderated discussion. So we will spend about 15 minutes just going through a few questions that I have, and then we'll have time to kind of go to the audience and see if they have questions as well. But I'd like to start off with a very broad question in terms of, a lot of this event has been about, we need to scale up, we need to work together to move forward. And this is something that we heard from the keynote. And so, very broadly from where you sit in your respective institutions, what do you see as the main barriers or constraints to really scaling up storage in developing countries? And so perhaps I can start with you, Chandra, from your perspective at the World Bank and the range of experience, that you have through the Energy Storage Partnership, how is the bank really addressing some of these constraints faced by your client countries? And what are you doing to really unlock that value of storage?
Thank you, Lulu. Yeah, that is our main main challenge, and also our day job, if I will. So yeah, essentially it starts quite early in the sense that familiarity with the technology, understanding what it can do. We start like that, engaging our clients. And then it develops into some initial assessments on what value storage can provide, whether it is a grid scale or a mini grid, what value that can provide. So you do assessments around that, and then go towards the next step of what kind of basic regulatory needs or policy needs may be there just to even get the pilot project going. So we focus on the fundamentals at that point, and then eventually build towards some sort of an initial investment operation. Then we come to SIF or others who can help us give that concessionality for our IBRD or IDA financing, to make it more worthwhile. So that is generally the trend of how we engage. Some cases it can be quite fast, within few months, 6 months. Some cases it takes longer, given that the issues that we are facing with the battery storage, there are fires, there has been a fire in the US, in Korea, there were so many fires that we experienced in our own projects in Myanmar. So we need to address those issues as well as value it brings. So, it's a complex process, I would say, but those are generally the things that we do. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Chandra. And I think, I think this would be a good question as well for Alessandro, given that Enel, has worked in 32 countries. And so, reflecting on what Chandra has just said in terms of, the upstream work that needs to happen with countries, how does Enel actually, decide in terms of, which operations, which regions and markets in developing countries to operate in, and what are you looking for in order to make that a good business case?
Yeah, thank you. Basically, I mean, one of the main things that we seek in developing countries to deploy storage is the regulatory framework, because in most of the cases, one of the key challenges for storage is that in developing countries there are no open markets for deploying projects, and there is, basically a need from the government entities and the main players in the market to understand what is the value that storage can provide to them, and to open some procurement process for enabling this deployment. So this requires also, as I said during my presentation, some steps and some upgrades in the regulation to allow the participation of storage, and secondly, to create some remuneration mechanism for these capabilities, because obviously storage relies on energy coming from other sources, so it requires value added services to happen. Otherwise, there will, if compared to the standard generation cost of renewable energies, it will not happen, because of course adding additional capabilities such as the opportunity to be dispatchable to support the network, we need some mechanism to reward this type of services.
Okay, that's very interesting. And thank you for highlighting the point about markets and the need for regulations to really attract those investments. And so I would like to bring it to Heike and really talk about, why do you think the NAS battery has not particularly been deployed in developing countries? I'm thinking about, for example, parts of Africa. Do you think it's, really about these market constraints, or are there other reasons in your opinion?
Thanks, Yulu. I mean, in principle, what we have, or what we all face, is that the markets have been developing in developed countries earlier than they did in developing countries. So the reason why there is little installation in developing countries may also be due to that. I mean, when we look into the requirements of the developing countries, then we often deal with blackouts, then we deal with the diesel generators that are doing a job, then we deal with high prices for diesel, with pollution, with CO2 emissions, and so on. And I mean, explicitly there, we are talking with a lot of people, a lot of potential customers explicitly in Africa about these topics, because there the business cases are, I wouldn't call them pretty simple, but they can be calculated and people immediately see the trade-off, or the benefits. And in principle, when you talk about the NAS batteries, so when you look into a solar cycle, solar you can buy everywhere. You can have them in a microgrid, in a mini grid. Then you have to balance this usual cycle of the sun going up and sun going down. But you may need, as long as you are, for example, an industrial customer, you may need also energy in the evening and in the early morning. And there comes the match within NAS technology. So it is very easy and then cost competitive, to bring in the energy to charge these batteries over 6 hours, 8 hours, and discharge them, I don't know, for 2 hours now, 5 hours later, and then 1 other hour in the morning, for example, whatever you like. And this is where we see the benefits. And yeah, talking with all these people, especially in Africa, we see also from our local organizations who can pretty good support, because BASF has a global network of subsidiaries. There we see that there's really a lot of interest, and we hope and cross fingers that we soon see some installations in the developing countries as well, to the best of the country and the customer, and as well as to the best of BASF.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really great to hear. And before I have more specific questions on technology and financing, I would just like to ask Piyush, from your experience in India, and it's really great to see the progress and the work that's already being made. But what do you see are the remaining needs, whether it's more policy efforts or financing, or we just need more investments in technology to really push things ahead in India?
Well, Lulu, you're really getting me started. I think Dr. Emre very nicely sort of explained in his keynote yesterday how the whole energy ecosystem is sort of fundamentally changing. It's getting more and more complex because of decentralization, decarbonization, and digitalization. This complexity is also compounding the problems in the entire value chain across multiple levels, starting with technology, but all the way to markets and sort of education of customers, customer access. We can develop whatever technology we want, but if the ultimate users do not understand that, as Chandra just mentioned, and if you're not able to make it affordable for them by introducing the right type of blended financing, then it's just pointless. We've only done half the work. So to answer your question at the highest level, I think there are imperfections and gaps across the entire chain, starting with technology, ending with getting those sort of storage devices in the hands of final users and customers. And I think comprehensive focus and work is needed on all these different elements rather than sort of pull out and focus on one versus the other.
Right. And, that's certainly a great segue into the issue of financing and perhaps the role that concessional finance, including finance provided by the CIF, could, provide to these markets. We know that, certainly we're seeing, significant cost declines in the cost of batteries. And so, this makes them quite attractive. But at the same time, we also heard yesterday that, there are overall higher costs related to maintenance and installation at facilities and sites. And so I just want to take it back to perhaps Alessandro and Chandra to talk about how you're working with countries to kind of deal with some of these cost challenges, and perhaps where you see concessional finance possibly coming in to support.
Yeah, I can start. Yeah, basically the role of concessional finance is very important for developing countries to facilitate, the deployment of storage. First of all, concessional finance can be used to fill, the gaps when in countries where there is not yet parity of the technology compared to the current mix. And in most cases, it is not only about the technology itself, but also about how the services are remunerated or the existing subsidies for other technologies. So concessional finance can help to fill these gaps, and it can be provided actually in different forms, because it can be either provided directly to investors, or also as a support for the local governments to fill the gaps and perform the studies or test the applications that will allow deploying storage. And this can enable larger programs that can generate an increase in project delivery.
Okay. Chandra, would you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, sure. look, we have to look at it from, what is the objective? The objective is to get reliable and clean electricity for the end users, whether it's agriculturalists or customers, industries, whoever, right? From that perspective, you need, it's being it's being catered to by conventional technologies now, and we are moving to different technologies. So in that sense, the risk is with the provider, whether it is a private sector, IPP, or whether it is it's a government producing. So they need to be confident with the technology that they are putting there, because they would have to face the wrath of the consumers if things go wrong. So they have to be careful on how they select. They will see the track record, they will see the reliability, cost, and ultimately, even if we provide concessional financing, the risk is the overall risk of financing, and that is theirs. So of course, concessional financing can help, and it is definitely helping in that. But we need to, even without that, even this won't move further. So it helps, definitely. It helps a lot at this point of time when the market is trying to take off, even if it makes, like Heike was saying, in markets where heavy fuel oil is being used extensively, on paper, the economics sounds perfect. But in reality, given where the technology is, when the supply chain is, there are augmentation issues, or the mismatch between the solar lifeline and the battery lifeline. There are all these issues to be considered. So the concessional financing and hopefully grant financing is critical. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandra. And so I do have a final quick question for Piyush and Heike, as you raise the question of technology. Heike, what do you think are some of the key features from a technological perspective that would be critical in developing countries? You mentioned some of them in your presentation, but perhaps you can expand on this a little bit more. Oh, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, the usual mistake. So, I mean, when talking about developing countries, areas where storage will be deployed are remote. So it must be easily possible to transport things there, without having any issues. It is extremely crucial that they can be installed there easily, and that people who are there on the spot are capable to maintain, for example. So it's impossible to bring people over there from, I don't know, very far away in order to fix a problem. So it needs to be technology-wise and development-wise, something which can easily be handled by the people who are there. I already highlighted the climate resilience. I mean, most of the developing countries are countries with a higher temperature over the year, and a lot of irradiation. So that means in order to reduce the number of problems, like you highlighted, Chandra, this needs to be something which is a very tolerant installation. So no need, no need to cool, no need to have special efforts in order to get these systems and to keep them running without any issues. And I mean, also when it's really a critical structure, then you need sort of a remote control or a remote observation system, which also has to be facilitated with the existing infrastructure, for example. So many aspects which allow then to have a proper system in the end.
Okay, and Piyush, do you have anything quickly before we move to the audience?
Yes, I think on the technology, I'll just make a couple of points. First of all, almost all developing countries also have modern grid-based infrastructure. So to that extent, I think there is a need at the both ends of the spectrum. We need those sort of advanced technologies which are working for utility scale enhancements in those parts of the developing countries. And then we also need, as I also covered in my presentation, mature, almost legacy established technologies, but at much lower cost for decentralized solutions. So I think we need interventions on both ends of the spectrum.
Okay, great. We could continue this discussion forever, but for the purpose of time, I will turn it over to my colleague, Sarah, because I do hear that we have a lot of interesting questions from the audience. So Sarah, what are we seeing?
Great, thanks, Lulu. So the first question we have, I believe is either for you or Chandra, and it's asking, is the SIF funding only available for battery technology projects?
I will answer that question first. No, it's not only available for battery technologies. We have funding available for the whole spectrum of storage technologies, from battery solutions, thermal. We're also very keen to support hydrogen and other systems. And so certainly, you know, we welcome applications from our multilateral development banks to submit very innovative proposals that look beyond battery technologies.
Great, thanks. The next question is asking to hear a little more about the competitive advantage of NAS batteries over lithium-ion batteries.
Heike? Yeah.
Well, yes, I mean, there is never, or there is always a better or worse if you compare it to the applications. Yeah. So I think what is extremely crucial about every storage application is that it has to fit the purpose, and of course must be cost competitive. Yeah. So when you explicitly ask for the benefits of sodium sulfur batteries, then you will find them when we talk about an charge and discharge profile of about 6 to 8 hours. Yeah. Because there you immediately meet the sweet spot of this technology, and this is usually always the best thing to hit, because then costs, performance, and all the rest really fall into one piece, and the technology is competitive in principle. I mean, people are always talking with us about soft factors, like, I mean, you know, these discussions about rare metals and things like that, yeah, and how will all the supply situation be, how will costs develop for lithium and things like that. So we do not face that at all, because, I mean, it's called sodium sulfur battery because it mainly consists from sodium and sulfur, which are, I mean, coming from a chemical company, sodium hydroxide and sulfuric acid are the biggest chemicals in the world. So explicitly cheap, yeah, in principle, and there is not much more than sand, graphite, aluminum for the casings, and that's it. So we do not discuss and run into these issues. Also, when thinking about how to recycle and to reuse, yeah, because there is much less of a mix compared to a cathode material, for example, for lithium-ion. But I mean, lithium-ion is a great technology. And whenever it comes to high power applications, and this is what we also face in e-mobility, this is the technology of choice at the moment. Also in energy storage, when you need short duration, high power applications, I think currently there is not much way around this technology.
Great. Any other questions, Sarah?
Yeah, the next question we have is for Piyush. So based on your experience, what is the dominant form of battery energy storage employed in community-based renewable energy projects in India?
Okay, well, up until now, for smaller applications like solar home systems and all, the primary technology was lead acid battery because it was most cost efficient. But I think we're starting to see a shift towards lithium-ion batteries. For larger applications, again, I think up until now, the dominant technology has still been lead acid batteries. But there again, I think there are experiments going on with a variety of different technologies.
Okay, I think we can take 2 more questions before we wrap up.
Okay, and then just a follow-up question then for Piyush is, want to hear more around the challenges faced in adopting lithium-ion batteries in the community-based projects in India.
It's just a cost issue. I think many community, when you say community scale projects, you're probably referring to smaller village level mini grids. The economics just doesn't add up. I think even with lead acid batteries, the generation costs are quite high, because of which the mini grid projects have to be sort of again concessionally funded, or you have to sort of solve for that cost problem through financing interventions. And even though I think there is a recognition that over the longer duration, the total cost of ownership and lifetime value from a lithium-ion battery would be higher, there's just sort of that upfront capex barrier to cross and that resistance. So, so that's one thing. Second thing is that it's also an education thing. I mean, until a technology has universally established itself, people are generally sort of hesitant to start with it. So the lithium-ion technology is sort of now going up the maturity curve, and the understanding and maturity and comfort of developers, particularly small developers working at a community level, is also increasing. And with it increasing, I expect to see more and more installations relying on some of the new technologies.
All right, and so then the last question that we can touch on is, what's preventing sodium sulfur batteries to be widely available in mainstream since it's been in the market for 20 years?
Is that for me? I don't think I'm sort of most qualified to answer that.
We can ask Heike to answer that, or Chandra, if you have any thoughts on that as well.
Could you please repeat? I got a little bit lost in the question. Who has to answer?
I would invite you. Sarah, maybe you can ask the question again.
Sure. So what's preventing sodium sulfur batteries to be more widely available in mainstream, considering they've been on the market for 20 years?
There is no constraint. I mean, you saw or maybe recall the map which I showed in the end. And there you see the very widespread deployment of these batteries. And you also saw that the focus is on Japan. So NGK being a Japanese company with a strong home turf in Japan, but also spread over a lot of installations globally. So there is no limitation for the further use of that. And I mean, being here today, yeah, so we are on the one hand side successfully deploying sodium sulfur systems, and we are here to inform and to talk about the benefits, especially in the developing countries where this can match. So no constraints in either way.
Okay, great. That brings us to the end of our panel. And just to close off the session, I would just like to thank each of you for being part of this panel. And, you know, there's certainly really great market opportunities for storage in developing countries, as we already know. But I think from this panel, you know, context is very important. And so there's important financing and policy questions that need to be asked as we sort of scale up investments in countries. And so I would invite you all to kind of continue to engage with us through our learning platform, because certainly your expertise and knowledge would be relevant for us to make progress on this agenda. I would also invite the audience to continue to engage in the discussion online with the hashtag Keeping the Power On. We also welcome all your thoughts and comments there as well. So thank you very much again, and I will turn it over to you, Tom.
Great. Thank you so much, Lulu. And thank you, Piyush, Heike, Alessandro, and Chandra for the engaging discussion. And thanks to everybody who submitted questions for the discussion. We really appreciate that. We want to spend a moment here coming back to the question of topics for future engagement and some of the challenges and opportunities that are top of mind for all of you. So this is step 2 of the crowdsourcing that we did earlier. Thank you for all the brainstorming. We've turned that into a poll that would give us the opportunity to do some ranking of topics that'll just help us inform future programming for the Global Energy Storage Program and be able to engage all of you on topics that are of most importance to you. So we'll be back in Slido. So for those who have still have it open. That is great. And for those that maybe closed it, one of my colleagues can put the, oh, there we go. We've got the link right there in the chat. So why don't we go to the next slide? And the poll that we have for you here, again, it's a ranking poll. And the question we'd like people to address is, on which of these energy storage topics would you most like to learn from experts and stakeholders in the coming year, and to be able to engage the community that is on this, participating in the event today, and the broader network of people working on energy storage. We've identified, I think, about 10 topics based on the brainstorming earlier in the day, which you'll see on the screen, and you'll see the full list of topics on your mobile device or browser. And I would invite people to select those topics that are of most important to you, and then you can move the topics around to rank them, where top of the list are things that are most important to you, and lower down are things that are less important to you. And I see that people are starting to take the poll and do some of the ranking. So we'll give a little bit of time for people to look through the list of topics and identify which ones are highest priority for you for engagement going forward. I'd also say that as we're starting to see some of the topics ranked here, if there are specific questions that you have in the context of some of these areas, feel free to chat those in. So for example, I'm seeing that cost and cost effectiveness of storage is kind of topping the list at the moment. If there are specific questions that you have about cost effectiveness, issues related to costs of energy storage technologies, or other aspects of cost, for example, feel free to go ahead and just chat those to us, either using the Zoom chat or the Q&A functionality in Slido.
Okay.
All right. Give people just a few more moments to add your thoughts and ranking to top priority topics. All right. If anybody would like to participate in the ranking, this is your opportunity. And again, feel free to chat in any specific questions that you have around some of these topics, or you can use the Zoom for that, or the Q&A. All righty, great. So interesting. It looks like we've got money is near the top of the list for sure. Cost and cost effectiveness of storage, commercially viable business models for storage technologies, which is related, I believe, to cost and cost effectiveness, accessing and accelerating financing for energy storage projects, similarly around the cost and value of storage, as well as we move into the list, questions about the relevance of different types of storage solutions for local context, and the role that storage plays in broader energy systems. And then I also, on the list, are local understanding, capacity, and skills for storage deployment, which I think both relates to some of the local economic opportunity, as well as some of the integration and questions that are above. So thank you all for doing the ranking. Again, I'd invite you, as you look at this list, to suggest other topics of interest to you, or any questions that you have in the context of these topics, and this will help us design future programming that addresses some of the key needs and interests that you all have. All right, maybe we can move into the next session. Why don't we go one more slide? All right, great. So what I'd like to do now is move into some time to talk about the Global Energy Storage Program Monitoring and Reporting Toolkit. We have some information to share with you on this, and then also some engagement with you all on this topic. I would like to introduce to you Sandra Romboli with Climate Investment Funds. She's led the results team at Climate Investment Funds since 2016. Sandra is an economist and evaluator with 20 years of operational, analytical, and advisory activities experience acquired within the World Bank, the UN, Global Environment Facility, and the private sector. Sandra has extensive experience in results and impact management, monitoring and evaluation system development, portfolio analysis, and in conducting independent evaluations. So Sandra, I will turn it over to you to talk about the Global Energy Storage Program Monitoring and Reporting Toolkit. And I will note that you are joined by your colleague, Matthew Harris. And I believe at an appropriate time, Sandra, you will turn it over to Matthew, and we'll run through some polling and engagement with our audience on that. So Sandra, over to you.
Thanks very much, Tom, and hi to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and be part of this learning event. This topic is very timely and important, and so we're very happy to be here. So as Tom said, my name is Sandra Romboli, and I work at the Climate Investment Funds. And with me today, I also have Matthew Harris, who is my colleague. We both work in the results and monitoring and reporting team. And Matthew will be going through some analytics and studies of our learning plan later in this presentation. And we also have an exciting polling exercise that we will be doing. But I'm going to start to take you through the new toolkit, the monitoring and reporting toolkit that we just launched this morning for the Global Energy Storage Program of the CIF. So this is now live on our website, and I would like to encourage all of you to go there and have a look at it. It's on the Climate Investment Funds site. Next slide, please. So CIF was designed in part as a learning lab back in 2008. And this was, in fact, one of the core principles for the CIF, to be producing learning and contribute to advancing the learning agenda. And as a part of a learning lab, it's to understand direct, transformative, and broader impacts of dedicated climate finance. So that is one of the focuses of the CIF. And along this vein, we in the monitoring and reporting team developed a first of its kind monitoring and reporting toolkit for this new Global Energy Storage Program of the CIF. And this toolkit will serve as a learning vehicle to advance results measurement approaches in this field of different energy storage technologies. And as part of this monitoring and reporting system that we have put in place, we have the regular monitoring and reporting. And in addition to that, we have added some more innovative elements to the system. And one of them is the real-time monitoring. And the real-time monitoring will involve a set of analytics and demand-driven studies that will generate knowledge as we go. And the goal of this real-time monitoring is to go beyond just the annual normal reporting cycle and to fill the knowledge gap that often exists in the interim as projects are starting to be implemented. So this program is set to be rolled out alongside the implementation of the projects under the Global Energy Storage Program for the CIF. Next slide, please. So the toolkit itself, what is the purpose? So in the toolkit, we have set the frame for and the approach for monitoring and reporting and collecting results for this program. So it sets out the protocols for how this is taking place, what is meant to be done, and it also defines all the indicators that we have, as well as provide the guidance and directions for how to implement them. And it acts as a vehicle for learning. And the main primary target for this toolkit is the MDBs, because these are the people that will be implementing the products of the global energy storage that the SIF works with. So they will be directly responsible for implementing the monitoring and reporting of these projects and report back to the SIF. But we also hope and believe that there will be a wider target audience for this toolkit. And we think that the energy storage community, technical specialists, any M&R practitioners, and others working in climate finance would be interested. And in fact, anyone who's interested in learning how to measure results related to energy storage in developing country contexts could please have a look at this toolkit and see if you find it valuable. We hope to overall contribute to the advancing the learning agenda, of course, on energy storage in general overall as well. Next slide, please. So this slide gives you a schematic of the indicators that we have in this toolkit. I won't go into too much detail, but we basically have 4 different sort of sets of indicators, as you can see here. The first dark blue section is what we refer to as the CTF indicators. This is the Clean Technology Fund under the SIFs. And the Global Energy Storage Program sits under this program formally, so that's why those indicators are also included here. And then in the light green section, we have the specific indicators that we have for the Global Energy Storage Program itself, which is energy rating, power capacity, and also how many new regulations, codes, or standards that have been adopted. In addition to those 2, we also have the light blue section, which is the project-specific indicators. And here, these indicators will vary depending on how the project is set up and what kind of project we're talking about. And these project-specific indicators will draw from the project log frames that are already been put in place for the various projects by the MDBs themselves. And the last part, which is the sort of gray rectangle, is the co-benefit indicators that are both qualitative and quantitative in nature. And these include aspects on gender, employment, access to energy, social inclusion, health and safety, competitiveness, industrial development, and other aspects as well. And all of these different parts are being implemented alongside the real-time monitoring, which we will be doing in the SIF-AU as well. And the core indicator sections I just talked about are going to be fed into the system from the MDBs. And all of these different bits and pieces of the system will contribute and go into the annual results reporting. So there will be an annual report coming out each year that will present what has been achieved and also present findings from implementation and from studies and analytics that has been done throughout the year coming from the system. I'm not going to go into the specifics on the different indicators this morning, I think, but I will encourage all of you to please have a look at the toolkit itself online. It also contains a couple of examples where you can see how the indicators would work in practical examples, how the indicators could work for a certain project. So please do have a look. And with that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Matthew, who's going to take you through the next part of this presentation. Thank you so much.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Can we get the next slide, please? Thank you. So my name is Matthew Harris. I'm also in the SIF monitoring and reporting team, and I'll plan to elaborate a bit more on this Global Energy Storage Program real-time learning plan As Sandra just indicated, it's a key feature of the larger GASB monitoring and reporting system as outlined in the toolkit. Next slide, please. So the real-time learning aspect of GASB monitoring and reporting complements the 4 categories of indicators that were just discussed. Since that part of the system relies largely on indicators, it mostly provides snapshots or specific pieces of information that may lack further context. And moreover, we expect that many results are not likely to materialize until after deployment of energy storage or renewable energy infrastructure, which typically only comes at the end of a project. So we wanted to complement this approach. We're working toward an M&R system that informs GASB investments, both current ones and the ones that are yet to come, based on actual implementation experience of the program in real time. We heard from Bloomberg New Energy Finance yesterday about rapid growth and falling costs in the energy storage sector. And with this promise comes the need to develop further knowledge on the new and existing technologies, and specifically how they respond in different emerging markets and developing country contexts with their own energy needs and challenges, as many panelists and participants have been discussing over the past few days. Finally, we want the GASB learning plan to be demand-driven, relevant, and useful for the stakeholders of the program. So rather than us coming up with new studies, we'd like to hear from you on what you would find most useful or compelling, or what you view as the most pressing knowledge gaps in this field. So staying true to this approach, we'll launch another poll in a few moments on your priorities. So apologize for those who are a little pulled out already today, but here we're going to focus a bit more on specific studies and activities that will draw from more of this monitoring and evaluation, monitoring and reporting, learning framework from implementation. And then secondly, we'd like to announce today that we'll soon be launching a call for expressions of interest to carry out 1 or more of these studies. This will be forthcoming in the next few months. So for those of you representing organizations who might be interested in implementing 1 or more of these studies, please do stay tuned. Next slide. Our GASB real-time learning plan covers 2 phases, roughly from 2021 to 2024, leading to learning that mirrors that same period of high growth and dropping costs we've seen in the global market forecasts. We're pleased to launch today the toolkit, as Sandra just explained, as the pivotal milestone in the first phase. But for the remainder of the first phase and the entirety of the second phase, we're planning to carry out a number of real-time learning activities. And for that, we'd appreciate crowdsourcing your preferences. We've pre-selected 10 learning activities that I'll walk you through now, and then we'll open again the Slido for you to vote. It's not a zero-sum game. We're planning to include multiple studies within the learning plan, so no need to choose just one. You'll be able to select, I believe, up to 5. And then we'd also like to stress that the proposed activities remain preliminary in form. So if you have specific feedback on the ones that we're proposing, maybe certain directions it should go, aspects that could be combined, other considerations to bring to our attention, please do feel free to go ahead and type them into the chat box at any time. So similarly, I won't go into a great amount of detail on the different activities proposed, but just enough to give you a flavor so you know what you're voting on. And then these activities will be further refined and developed following the event and through the upcoming call for expressions of interest. So at that, the first proposed activity is a SIF portfolio analysis. Since we already have quite a large portfolio in our SREP and CTF programs of renewable energy, some of which already do have energy storage components embedded within these projects, this activity would kind of seek to extract findings and lessons from these more advanced and implementation projects that are already in the SIF portfolio. The second proposed activity is ex-ante impact modeling. Here we would use the parameters of GASB project design to model broader social and economic development impacts, for example, induced in supply chain employment or jobs created indirectly. SIF is already a partner within the Joint Impact Modeling Group, so we would expand activities to cover GASB as well. Number 3 is enhanced baseline studies. MDBs implementing GASB projects have their own approaches to conducting project baselines, but many in the energy sector are focused more on the technical engineering specifications or rely on secondary data sources as proxy estimates. So this study would support more specific targeted baseline research for select projects, which would include primary data collection and might focus on strengthening whole of energy system analysis, analyses of energy access and energy security issues, and could look quite different depending on the specific project needs. Number 4 is real-time project monitoring. So here, either building on the baseline activity proposed above or independently, this activity would support projects to include more robust real-time data systems at project level, serving to provide more granular details on renewable energy delivery, actual usage of storage components in practice, or social and economic co-benefits monitoring. So this would essentially expand data availability from field operators to the MDBs, SIF, and potential researchers. Number 5 is a case study focused on policy and regulatory interplay with investments. This has also come up a number of times in the past few days. And IEA stated in its 2019 tracking report that storage remains strongly dependent on favorable, stable policy environments, largely due to uncertainty and slow progress in establishing rules and regulations for its deployment and use. So this study would either conduct a deep dive for a single country, or perhaps a series of countries to provide comparative analyses of different regulatory features, good cases, challenges, et cetera. Next slide, please. Number 6 is the greenhouse gas methodology support, which would be in the form of guidance or technical support. Some have already discussed the difference between direct and indirect GHG emissions reductions from energy storage, insofar as energy storage either supports increased supply from renewables and how much, or if new renewables are co-located with storage assets. MDBs also have differing GHG accounting tools that they already use. So based on demand, SIF would work to strengthen guidance surrounding these methodologies to help incorporate energy storage components within accounting and scenario analyses. Number 7 is thematic nexus studies. So the idea here would be to take a closer look at the relationship between energy storage and other thematic areas. For example, this could be relationship between energy access and energy storage, or energy efficiency and energy storage. And we're also open to considering other forms of thematic nexus studies. Number 8 is a similar approach to the above, but it's focused more closely on SIF's new programming areas and other priority themes. So for example, we could consider relationships between climate smart cities and urbanization and energy storage, or clean industry and energy storage, or just transitions and energy storage. Number 9 is a little bit different, the end user UX study. So this approach would focus on investment activities with mobile end use, like EV, or stationary electricity end use, like behind the meter storage, off-grid, et cetera. And since some of these technologies require engagement from end-level users, the approach would borrow UX, that's user experience techniques, used already in the tech sector, to consider aspects like last-mile barriers and facilitators to technology adoption and usage, fluctuations in end user habits and behavior, and other questions of interest. And then finally, number 10 is a rapid assessment of technologies. So this would look at the range of energy storage technologies already available and under development. It would inform a framework for the menu of technology options and aim to create a kind of typology of challenges, lessons, considerations associated with each. And as the program progresses, this would draw more from actual projects under implementation. Next slide. So those were the 10 we've pre-selected, but we really do want to give you experts in the field an opportunity to weigh in and see what we might be missing, what might be especially useful or relevant, or would speak to a current knowledge gap. So we'll have that opportunity within the upcoming Slido as well. And then a few final general considerations before we go into the voting. First is just that this global energy storage program is quite new. So there are considerations of what it makes sense to do now, where projects haven't yet been under implementation, versus what might be better to do later. I also want to highlight gender and social inclusion to see how we can ensure responsiveness and equity, both in energy storage investments themselves, but also including them perhaps in the learning activities we're proposing. Then working with partners, acknowledging that these studies would have different implications and perhaps different demand from MDBs versus implementing entities, clients, end users, et cetera. So it's just important to consider here who is really demanding the study and who it would benefit. And then finally is more of just an FYI. For those less familiar with the SIF, there is an ongoing SIF evaluation and learning initiative. So we would seek to kind of coordinate activities where it makes sense to do so and maximize shared knowledge management. Next slide. Great, so at that we can jump into the polling. I don't know if Tom or Sarah can. This is just a recap of the activities I've gone over as we move into polling. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Great, thank you, Matthew. And we can sort of both lead people through this. I think at this point, everybody is an expert in ranking pollings today. So what I'd ask folks to do based on Matthew's discussion is to identify or help us identify what are the most useful and relevant learning activities for you and your organization. And we've got 10 or so of the learning activities that Matthew walked through loaded into the poll. What I'd encourage you to do is just pick the top 5 for you that would be most relevant for you or for your organization. And then among those 5, you can have the ability to rank those in order. Feel free if there are more or less than 5 that are on your list to do it that way. Or if you'd like to rank all 10 of them, you can do that as well. All right, great. I'm seeing some responses starting to come in, and we'll give people a few moments to do this. And then, as Matthew said, we have a follow-up question that we'll pose about, are there any other things that would be helpful for you or on your list, and would also invite you to chat those in using Zoom if you'd like to do that. So we'll give people a few moments to look through these and think about priorities. All right, we'll give people just a few more moments here to take a look at the list and add your thoughts about highest priorities, most useful and relevant learning activities for you. All righty, great. Let's see, so it looks like topping the list, we have rapid assessment of technologies. Oh, just got bumped out of the way by a case study on policy and regulatory issues. So policy and technology, topping the list, real-time project monitoring, ex-ante impact modeling, enhanced baseline studies, I think are all things that are in the top 5 at the moment, and I think certainly relevant to some of the discussions that we've had already today and some of the input from you all about the importance of policy and regulatory issues, interest in technologies that are emerging, their relevance, their cost effectiveness, some of the challenges and opportunities for implementation. And then building on the discussions that we had yesterday around the showcase and some of the energy storage projects that are underway, an opportunity for real-time project monitoring and forecasting around future impact. So that's great, Sandra and Matthew. Hopefully that is helpful for you in thinking about prioritization of learning activities going forward. So we did also want to see if there are things on your list that are not on this list. And so why don't we go to the next slide? And that's just a final kind of open text poll of whether there are any other types of energy storage studies or learning activities that you'd find useful and relevant to you and your organization that you didn't see on the list earlier. So we want to see if is there anything we're missing here, and give folks a few moments to share any thoughts on additional studies or learning activities that would be helpful for you. All right. I'm not seeing anything come up, so I think maybe Matthew and Sandra, that means that you all have done a very nice job of identifying studies and learning activities that would be most useful to this community. So that's great. Thank you, Sandra and Matthew, and we really do look forward to the information and work that is coming out of this work. And I think that this platform, as we move forward, is a great place to be able to share information and learning on these issues. Oh, good. We're seeing some more thoughts coming in from folks here. All right, and I would suggest, feel free to use chat, other ways to share any additional ideas with us. All right, let's see, why don't we just move into our final wrap up here. And I would like to introduce, or for those of you who were a part of our meeting yesterday, reintroduce Daniel Morris from Climate Investment Funds. Daniel is a clean energy lead on this work, and really one of the key leaders in bringing this event to everybody today and the work that is going forward. So Daniel, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tom. First of all, thanks to all of our panelists and speakers today. I think it was another day or half day of really excellent content, a lot of different perspectives that we heard. And, our goal here with this event, and really with the entire learning platform that we're putting on, is to try and bring a bunch of different stakeholders who don't necessarily speak to each other all the time to the table to have a conversation, to represent different perspectives with respect to energy storage and where things are right now. And I hope that you all think we did a good job. I think the speakers that we've heard have really highlighted the range and the diversity of perspectives in this space, what needs are out there, where people see the sector moving. We heard from Christine Lampe Onorud, her perspective, I think kind of a positive, optimistic perspective of where energy is moving, where energy storage is moving, and what challenges need to be addressed to get that deploying in developing countries. On the panel, we heard a whole range across the value chain of different views. We've heard the good work that's going on in the World Bank's energy storage partnership and the good stuff that's being done there, lots of information being made available to people. We heard, different technology perspectives from the specific technology that BASF has developed and is looking to deploy, to Enel and their vision as a utility, looking to get assets on the ground and making it available to people. And then what happens when storage is made available from Piyush? We heard the wide variety of uses in India. And then on top of that, you sort of see how the global energy storage program is developing and how we're hoping to keep track of it so that we can come back to you using the toolkit that Sandra and Matthew set out and laid out for you to track development over time and see how success is manifesting in different places in different countries around the globe. So it was a really exciting day, and one that we hope not only was very useful for you, but really highlights the value that we think the global energy storage program is going to provide. As we heard yesterday, we are right now a $350 million program in terms of resources. We're working with our MDB partners to fund different projects around the globe. Our pipeline is huge, very oversubscribed for the resources we have, which I think shows the demand that's out there. The program launched in December 2020. Since then, we've had 3 projects approved, with more coming down the pipe. So it's a very exciting time. It's a very dynamic time, and one which we think can benefit from an ongoing dialogue of different practitioners with different perspectives, which was the motivation behind the learning platform in this first event, to bring you all together and benefit from your knowledge. We've already been doing that with the feedback we've received today from polls and things like that. And we hope to continue to do that. The feedback you provided us today will inform later sessions that we're planning to host in the year. So as we said, this is a learning platform. There will be different events down the line. I just want to preview those a little bit and sort of whet your appetite so that you continue to stay engaged with us. In July, mid-July, we're probably looking around the 14th or 15th of July, we're hoping to host another event similar to this, more of a workshop type format, where we're really going to do a deep dive on technologies. I mean, that has been a theme throughout the presentations over the past 2 days, lots of interest in different technologies and their applications. And so we want to take a deeper dive into, what storage technologies are out there, where are they viable, what makes them viable, what are some of the deeper considerations that are needed for different types of technology. We're looking for that to be probably a half-day event, sort of like the first day or the second day of this. We realize that 2 days is a lot to ask people to tune into. Schedules are busy, time zones are unmoving, and not particularly sympathetic to us wanting to get together all the time. So we want to make sure that we can put things in a format where we can maximize the availability of people who are interested in participating. We're looking to partner with some really great institutions on that, specifically potentially going to involve the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, which is part of the U.S. Department of Energy National Lab Network. We have some good experts there, and we'll look to bring others on board as we develop that agenda. So please stay tuned for that mid-July. After that, in September, we'll be looking to host another event on financing. As you saw today from the poll results, people are really interested in the money aspect of these projects, in financing. And so we'll look to come together and do a deep dive on different aspects of financing, how it can be accessed, how it can be deployed. We'll look to do that toward the middle end of September. Which will be a busy time, especially for those in the climate space. There's a lot of events going on. So we'll make sure to host that in a way that doesn't preclude you from participating in other events, and really can amplify our message in some of those others as well. And then we will look to wrap things up on this learning platform for 2021 toward November, December, probably following the COP, or depending on how things go, if a live person event is possible, look to bring people together to really look at the long-term perspectives of energy storage. What is a roadmap beyond the next 3 to 5 years look like? What are considerations that need to be made? Who needs to be involved in those conversations? We'll look to bring that together and really provide what is hopefully a nice cap of a year's worth of events. There will be associated events probably where we focus on so the learning that can be done and try to bring in the understanding and perspectives that you all have provided us so far, and will continue to do so. So with that, I want to thank you all for participating, hanging in there over 2 days worth of events. I think really engaging content, really interesting perspectives provided. We will look to continue to spotlight those different perspectives and provide an opportunity for you all to connect with us. And on that note, I will turn it back over to Tom, who can inform us about the networking opportunity that we now have. Tom?
Thanks so much, Danny. And I want to just add a reminder to everyone, because I know there are some questions coming in chat, that we have been recording this event all day as well as yesterday, including the breakout sessions yesterday, and we'll be posting the recording of the event along with all of the slides from our presenters, as well as the presenter bios and information on an event website that'll be hosted by Climate Investment Funds, and we'll get that information out to everybody when that is available. So I encourage you to share that information with colleagues that weren't able to make it today. And I will also add that so many good questions have come in during the Q&A sessions and in chat, and all of those will inform, as Daniel was saying, our future programming and looking to address some of those key questions and key priorities that people have shared. I do want to talk a little bit about what's next. And if we were all in person, this would be the time when, if we're still morning, we'd all get coffee together. If it were evening, we would probably have something else together. So we did want to create a little bit of space just for people to have some networking time and a little bit of relaxation time with those who are on the phone. And we've set this up through a technology called Gather. And let me just talk a little bit about that, and then we'll give information about how to move into that space. So if we could go to the next slide. So Gather is an online networking platform where you are represented by an avatar that can move around and meet with others. And we the link to Gather is here on the screen. We will chat that in to the chat, and so you could click on that at the appropriate time to get into it. Once you get into Gather, there will be a little screen that pops up that mainly asks you to enter your name, and then you can hit next. It also allows you, if you'd like to change what your character looks like, etc., to be able to do that. But the main thing would be to enter your name. After you do that, it will ask you some questions, and it depends on which browser you're using, but basically they're to allow use of your camera and microphone, and that just allows you to engage in Gather in the way that you've been able to engage in this Zoom meeting. And then a little button at the bottom to join. And once you join, what you will see is on the next screen, you will enter a virtual space, and you'll be able to move around in that space using the arrow keys on your keyboard. And what we've done is to construct kind of a big space where people can move around in it. You will enter into kind of a general networking space, but we've also created a couple of rooms off of that space. And I think once people get into it and move around a little bit, you'll get a sense of the layout. But there are signs near the doors to individual rooms, and we've set up some thematic rooms, one on technology, one on finance, one on energy access and kind of broader economic development, social development aspects of clean energy, and then another one on multilateral development bank projects. There are no presentations or anything else in these rooms. It's just a way, if you're looking for people who are interested in what you are interested in, to increase the likelihood that you can find them in these spaces. And we'll have some of the support team there at the help desk. If people need any help, we'll be positioned around the entrances to these rooms. If people would like to find us as well. What I would invite, though, is our participants who are from the multilateral development banks, particularly if you're involved in energy storage projects, you may want to go over to the MDB projects room, just as an initial guide on where there may be folks that want to talk to you about those. So let's go to the next slide. And so the way this works is as your avatar in the room gets close to other people, you'll see their video and pop up on your screen, and it will enable audio, and you can talk to each other. So when you get close to one other person, you can just have a one-on-one conversation. But there are also spaces in here that are generally defined by either tables or rugs on the floor where you're able to talk to a group of people that are all in that area. So I encourage folks to, just try it out. Talk to an individual, join a group. And what I'd encourage you all to do is sort of take on the personal challenge of maybe just, meeting 3, 4, 5 people over the course of this. And a great way to start a conversation is just to say, hello, my name's Tom. What do you work on? So a personal challenge for everybody in the networking space to introduce yourself and ask somebody a question about what it is they're working on. And I suspect that you'll find all sorts of common ground. All right, let's see. So the link to gather is in the chat. We will also keep this space open with a final slide that has that link in it. So if people get lost somehow in the transition into the gather space, you'll know where to go. All right. Well, why don't we, we'll wrap things up with kind of a final video here, and then we'll come back and provide that link again. But that will be the invitation for people to leave this space and enter Gather space. And I look forward to seeing you as your avatars in Gather.